Hello and welcome to the Best Book Club podcast, all about talking about books, stories, whatever kind of literature I feel like for that episode. And this episode, I don't know why I keep saying this week, it's not a weekly thing. This episode, we're going to be talking about Dulling a Knife by Hannsgutherson and Shadowmelder, who I have with me here right now.
Hi. I think that's our cue, Shadow. Hello, world.
Hey,
Hi.
hello. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have the actual authors of the story on. Or the novel, I guess I should say, because it is one.
Yeah, I'm very picky. Because I like to toot my own horn, as Shadow knows, so I love to throw that out, but as we might get into it, in our community, the terminology maybe doesn't matter as much, but I like to add that level of like, look how awesome we are. We wrote a novel.
Well, but I mean, it really is quite an achievement. You guys were the first ones to actually write a novel. There have been plenty of stories, long form stories, multi-part stories that have gone on for a while, but they were released piece by piece. And you guys wrote the whole thing out into a book, which is it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So it's impressive to me that you guys were able to do that.
Yeah, the format of writing it all out before posting is definitely more rare. As you said, there's definitely been a ton of stories that could qualify as novels, but they're sort of written serially, and with that, of course, comes the chance that they may never be finished, which is something we've talked about. And even the longer stories I've written, they're just ones I'm sort of doing part by part, and with that, you can also get feedback week to week, and which is what often keeps writers going. But in our case with this, it was really like just the two of us. We hadn't told anybody we were doing this until it was done, really. I think I hinted at it, shall recall, with some people and groups we're friends with. I'd be like, we're writing this awesome Western story, it's so great. And I think when we realized we wanted to share it, that became more something we were talking about. But yeah, the whole idea of sort of putting something all together before sharing it is definitely a bit more rare. So it's cool when you think about that. Something I hadn't thought much about.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, first off, I hated it, and here's the 27 reasons why.
Nice.
Only 27. Wow, we're getting off lucky today. This is
Well,
great.
considering the length, it's pretty remarkable, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. Wow,
I-
13 chapters, only 27 things. Wonderful.
No, it was fantastic. I loved it.
Thank you.
I knew it's been since I joined the community. It's been every single story that has been long form has been posted weekly or monthly or what have you, and so being able to have that full thing all at once, I knew I wanted to do that. Just read it all at once, like a book, and it was really cool to see that you guys put so much effort into it, and it came out extremely well.
Well, thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And it's cool for us to get to talk about it after Shadow. We checked this a while back. We said it was like a year and like 4 months from start to finish for the whole thing, writing it, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, well,
And yeah.
late 2019, I guess, when we started.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, so you saw this project through the pandemic.
Yeah, I guess we did. I hadn't really thought about that. It's all a bit of a blur to me, the whole 2020 madness. But I think it was definitely something that helped get me through a lot of times. It, like I said, took us like over a year to do it. We weren't always actively in it. I think there were periods where I dropped it for a bit, and we would always be chatting and talking, and then we'd come back into it after a while. But it was always a lot of fun to do, and some of really amazing scenes. I'm super proud of how it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really cool to see that you guys were able to see it all the way through. Yeah, something that really struck me. When I was reading it, I think my favorite part, honestly, was the fight between Knife and what's the
Gina?
yeah, Dina. Yeah, that I thought that was so well written.
Yeah.
I could picture it happening exactly in my head as I was reading it, and like my heart was starting to race a little bit when the back and forth between them, and it really got me engaged and just A+ work, honestly.
Nice. Thank you.
Yes, that was that fight in particular was. Well, I mean, a lot of them, of course, are important, but I think that one was, one of the. Well, it was more important for June, since that was the turning point where she would say like she can't rely on someone else to handle her problems. She has to do it on herself. From her point of view, the answer was she has to do it personally, and
Yeah.
that it had to be conveyed there properly, not leave it to chance that maybe Gina would have been able to get her if she hadn't messed up. No, it had to be very clear that it had to be her in her point of view.
Yeah. So I guess a good point to start just dissecting this whole thing. What led you guys to decide you were going to write this?
It's a great question. I guess I can first start this off. To, I guess, begin without ranting too much, I know before this I had been doing some RPing with a few other people, and what I often found, and what I think many people find in the community when they RP, but I was definitely finding, because I was always a bit of a maximalist, was that the people I was RPing with, I would write long paragraphs going on with all these details and trying to fit in themes and character development, all stuff. And then they'd come back and they'd say like 2 sentences. They'd be like, "The wedgie hurt," and it was great. And I'd be like, "Oh," and I'd feel super disappointed. But I still was super into RPing for a long time. I really loved the idea of collaborating with somebody and just being better than I could be alone. And then Shadow and I, prior to starting Delling a Knife, if I have my timeline correct, we had worked on a couple other projects, RPing on some things. One's a sci-fi story that's really cool, and a couple other shorter ones that didn't go anywhere near as long as Delling a Knife, but we were able to do some really cool scenes and sort of get a feel for each other's writing, and Shadow was able to sort of help me develop and sort of spot some of my weaknesses and help me grow there and keep building some strengths. And then the idea, I'm not entirely sure where the idea, I think partly it was saying like, let's do something that's kind of rare in the community. Partly it's also what I was, in terms of always wanting to RP, one of the sort of rules I had was that I wanted everything I RP'd to be something I could post, because I didn't see a whole lot of point in just writing it in a vacuum. Like, we definitely enjoy it, but I'd be like, why can't everybody enjoy it? So from that, it was like trying to think of a genre that was unexplored in the community, and Western was one that sort of I had been thinking about for a while. And then Shadow, I'm sure you have some cool thoughts on sort of how we sort of landed on the idea, but it was really just sort of looking for another chance to RP with Shadow, because he's an incredibly talented writer, and the story just really started developing, and we had plans for what we quickly realized was going to be a longer story and just a chance to show some really cool characters, I thought, in an interesting setting.
You got up most of it. I think what I'd like to add is we were looking. Well, we were, if I recall correctly from the timeline, we were RPing, and then at some point we had the idea of starting some collaborative story. Since we had done some of that before, but those stories never got anywhere. We had a couple attempts, one on Lucky Fetish, one on DeviantArt, I think, and with other people, it didn't go that far for various reasons. And for this one, we thought, well, we're doing a lot of RPing already, right? And that's been going on well. So why don't we do this story as an RP? And that's how the whole thing, I think, started. We wanted to do like a RP / collaborative story. So we did some foundation work. We did some setting development before starting the RP. Not too much, like we're not world building the whole thing and knowing the plot and all that. But we were doing some stuff like, okay, it's gonna be a Western. We're gonna have this 2 main characters, and then some of the foundation that will, become the story later. And then that's how we started writing. It's just RPing and then compiling data. Well, actually, because we weren't sure we were gonna get this out. I mean, maybe Hans was, but I wasn't sure. We didn't actually do the smart thing, which would have been to back up the RP as we write it. We did it way later when we had a lot of RPing in the Discord channel.
Yes, we had a ton. But you make a great point, Shadow, and something definitely worth mentioning. There was definitely a moment where we went from just RPing little scenes here and there, and we'd done some stuff like, and I think throughout even Delling and I posting, we did some smaller RPs that didn't require a lot of world building. Stories like A Night at the Inn, we did. And these were sort of existing characters from our D&D group or other sort of RPs. But then, there was definitely a conscious shift where we said, let's actually collaborate on a story. And then we went back and forth and sort of what that means, who would write which character, how do we balance it out, and then going into things like outlining, and I threw out a bunch of ideas. And then as the story developed, we had some different thoughts about where it could go and had a pretty clear picture, unlike some RPs where we know they're going to be short one-offs, and even if we know what's going to happen, there's not going to be any huge depth or development in the characters or anything like that. And we were pretty clear, like both of us, that it was going to be a longer story. Sometimes in these RPs or collaborative pieces you do with people, you might lose patience for it very quickly. I found that with some I've done where I'm just like, wow, I want this to be over. And maybe they don't. Maybe they want it to keep it going because they're liking it, but you're kind of bored. That was never the case with this story. This one, like, I was really excited for us to get to the end, and we were able to, like, sustain it over a long period of writing and over a lot of words, which I think is just a testament to Shadow and the good team we ended up making, which was awesome.
Yeah. So what did the story look like when you first started working on it?
You mean like when we first starting RPing, like, or?
Yeah. Okay. So so what was sort of the inception point of where you sort of knew, okay, we're gonna write a story for this, rather than we're just gonna RP.
Yeah, so when we're talking about that conscious shift, I think pretty early on when we were starting to formulate the idea for Delling a Knife, it was pretty much intertwined with the idea, like, we're going to collaborate on what's going to be a much bigger story. It's not going to be like one of our RPs, and Shao, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think pretty early on, we knew pretty much out the gate, and we set out to sort of collaborate on a bigger story. And we knew it would be very similar to the way we would RP, with one of us takes on a character and one of us writes the others, and then we had to figure out what about the minor characters, who would write them and their actions. And then when we introduced new characters kind of quickly, who would write those and things like that. But in terms of what it looked like early on, it was very similar to what some of our other RPing looks like, where we sort of picked characters we would do. We had some idea of what they looked like. Shadow was very instrumental in making sure we had sort of character sheets with basic details that we could refer back to, and some ideas like age and things like that for the characters that might not even have been mentioned in the story, as I realized recently, some things like the characters' ages and things, or when the story's set. But and then from there we just sort of went back and forth as we started with just the sort of idea of that first scene, and from there we continued to develop the plot, different points it would reach to, different characters would be introduced and such as we went.
Okay.
Yeah, he's right. From the start, we even did like we managed this through a Discord server where we just RP the stuff, but we also had like channels where we just at the same time while we were RPing, we had channels that were just dedicated to discussing ideas, if you're gonna call it out of character. And then we also had like Hans said, character sheets that we didn't have like a lot of things in them, but it was just having a basic concept for whenever something relevant happens. Like for example, we need to make a reference to June's hair while we're writing chapter 12, but it's like we haven't mentioned it in like a year, like almost a year. Do you remember her hair? Probably not. So we look back at there, and we don't have to scroll through the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's character sheets. I guess is the term. They're definitely really important for writing, especially when you have such a long form piece and it goes on for such a long period of time. Some of those details can definitely get foggy and they can get mixed up. So
Yeah, definitely.
sort of with like how TV shows have like a show Bible of like everything that happens to a character is documented and everything about them as the show progresses and it's added to, and then you have this compendium of all this knowledge and information about each character and event. It definitely is a very it's a very powerful tool to have.
And if we ever wrote a sequel, which we have some ideas for, and who knows if we'll get into that. But we have some ideas for a potential sort of spin-off, if you want to call it that, to the story. And having a Bible might be handy, so we can recall a lot of the details that happen to the characters. Because by memory, like I remember a lot of the story pretty clearly. It sticks with me because it was so much fun writing it, and we went over editing it pretty closely, which is something, as you know, I don't do very much in my stories. I get too anxious, but this story, Shadow was like, we want to make sure it's as good as it can be, so we went through and edited it, both of us, very carefully, and I think that helped improve its quality a lot as well, which was good. But yeah, definitely, if we went to do like a spin-off or anything in the future, it might be useful to write out some of those plot points and stuff.
Yeah, and even if you don't ever actually spin off or write a sequel or anything, even if you just use a character in another story, having that there just to sort of keep the consistency of the character throughout is hugely important. And even if a lot of that detail is never revealed, I think I've talked about it before, sort of implied detail. It's huge, and it really it drives people's interest in characters because they really sort of start to get their own headcanons about what's going on, and when you like with posting stories weekly or just posting stories in general, getting that feedback from people, and they say, hey, is this going to happen, or like, hey, I think this is going on, even if you never say, yeah, that's actually happening, or no, that's not, in your head you'd be like, wow, yeah, that's that. Yeah, they got it. Like, and it's something. At least from my perspective, it's sort of like it's really cool to see, and it's I'm trying to think of the right word. It's fun, and like it's gratifying.
There's something rewarding about it for sure. The interesting thing about us and our perspective is we made it very clear from the get-go the story was written ahead of time, and what this does is if we had read some people's comments, I don't know what would have happened if we heard someone give a super amazing idea, like maybe this should have happened, and we'd be like, oh, that's too bad. There's no way. Like if we were writing it week to week, like in the case of like when a lot of my other stories, there was times I've seen ideas that people give, like, wow, that's great. Or sometimes writers ask for that because they don't know what to do next or they want to engage audiences. So we didn't have that opportunity. We're like, well, we're not going to change the story if somebody does say something cool. What I think happened, though, mostly because we told them, like, hey, the story's written, we're going to post it week to week. We really just had people speculating about what was going to happen, which was great. And we saw more people just leaving comments like they're really enjoying the parts and stuff like that. But if we gotten some really awesome ideas of what to do, I don't know, we would have been in a bit of a dilemma. I have to say, Shadow, we have to rewrite the story. Too many good ideas.
And going off of the sort of just the people commenting and giving feedback, did you expect your story to get as large as it did?
No way.
No.
It's huge. Absolutely huge. It's what, Shao? I love bringing up these numbers, as Shao knows, and I mentioned him. I want to plug it, but we have more than 100,000 views, right, collectively across all the parts.
Yeah.
Which is huge. That's ginormous. We have like a 10,000 views on average across each chapter, which is ginormous. On Lucky Fish forums, it's not anywhere near that because that board's kind of dead, but still a decent number of comments across the story and a good number of views for a site much dead.
Yeah,
so
I think
it's huge.
By proportionally, the Lucky Fetish had a lot more comments, like because of how small the viewer count is. There were so many comments proportional to the number of view counts, but I guess that's what usually happens on those forums. People are more active on the comment section.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I really didn't expect it. Like, you always hope, of course, the story's gonna do well, and I expected because of how many wedgies were in it, people would like it. How intense some of the scenes are, but it's been great to see people actually connecting with the characters. The fact that we have 3 fanfics, right? No, 2 fanfics now, and we were told there could be a third one from another writer in the works. Like, that's crazy to get that much love for your story. That's never really happened to me before, ever, to get that much love for a story.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Really
either.
incredible.
If you told me that the story was gonna get 1 fanfic, I wouldn't believe that.
Yeah,
Before-
same.
So it's like,
Same.
A story really having a legacy is just incredible because there's so many foundational stories in the community that sort of inspire people to start writing or just to continue exploring the fetish. But to actually have a tangible legacy of people producing content because they were influenced by what you did it's got to be mind-blowing and just such a gratifying experience.
Yeah, it is.
absolutely.
Especially in the case of 13 Creating Colds. We'll show him out. His first story he ever posted was a fanfic to Dulling a Knife. So when you talk about, the influence a story can have to get somebody writing, it's kind of the coolest thing you could do as a writer, and we were able to inspire him, and he's a great writer. It's super cool to see where he's taking his own story that sort of began as a fanfic and now is becoming a lot more, which is super exciting. But yeah, it's really, really amazing. So thank you to everybody who's read it and shown their love for it. It's awesome.
Yeah. All right. So going more towards elements of the story, which of your for both of you, who's your favorite character?
Oh, great question. Oh, I love this question.
Yeah,
Shao,
it's
you
tough
want to
to
go first? Shao knows what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I know what Hans gonna say. For me, it's hard to pick favorites because each character serves a purpose within the story, and I like all of them. Especially the main characters. I think that both of them make a great balance there most of the time. However, I do have to admit that I am a bit biased towards Caroline. I ended up, I guess conceiving her and being like the one writing the most from her. But I still pretty close with June/Jane. Yeah.
Nice. That's great.
What about
Shao.
you, Hans?
Yeah, it's got to be Caroline. She's my favorite. We were like near the end of the story, right? Shadow, the first time I said like, this is the story of Caroline. That's what Dulling a Knife is. This is before we even had the title, and I think the title kind of alludes to that a bit more than we maybe thought it would at first when we were trying to pick a title because we both struggle with titles, ironically. Um, but I love Caroline. Shadow, as he said, he's the one who really came up with the idea of her. And as he mentioned, he was the one writing her. For those curious, I was writing June most of the time, and Shadow most of the time was writing Caroline. So if you wonder why she's so hot, Shadow, you have him to thank for that. And then we sort of took turns with some of the other characters. For those curious, there were some times I was writing Abby and Ellen. Shadow did a lot of writing Claire, I think, especially early on. Another reason she's also incredibly hot. But Caroline, definitely my favorite. Seeing her growth, seeing some of the elements Shadow put in, like the ideas that she was kind of abused by her sister, her struggle to become her own woman. I think that's super interesting and in a lot of ways like a cooler arc than June's like do I get revenge, which is still super cool and a big driving factor, but to see Caroline as a leader, to see her get some really cool scenes, and then just to be so hot is also a huge, huge plus for me. I love Caroline. Definitely my favorite character.
Okay. I mean, out of all the characters,
Yeah.
I would say Abby was my favorite.
Ooh,
Wow.
that's an odd pick.
Yeah, it's a fun pick.
Yeah,
Abby's
she's
fun.
she's always there, but she's definitely a much more minor character.
Mm.
But I think in many ways she sort of drives the story, sort of pushing June to go further or to really consider what she's doing, or even just how blatant Abby is with like, just knowing that Caroline and June have a thing going on.
Yeah.
Just sort of checking her and bringing her back to bring her in, like giving her perspective of like, what does this really look like from the outside, and how is it affecting the rest of them? And it is very interesting seeing how June sort of starts to think about the other characters rather than just her one driving force of getting revenge on Caroline. She sort of starts to join into the group more and
Mm-hmm.
think
Yeah.
about how she's viewed and how she fits in with the other characters.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool pick for sure. Abby and Ellen, they were sort of yeah, they didn't get as much love or attention, and I was mentioning to Shadow the other day, like if we were to do a spin-off or something, I'd love to go deeper in like all the characters' minds, something you don't see a ton of in Dulling a Knife, and a lot of the detail you do get sort of hinted at, like Caroline's potential abuse and things like that, and I mentioned, but yeah, Abby's a super fun character. She gets to be brash. She gets to start out super like feisty and ready for a fight, while Ellen is very clearly the opposite, and she's more stoic and quiet and not into the wedgies as much as Abby is and stuff. So you get a cool little dynamic with them. So it's fun to hear she's your favorite character. I don't think we've heard that from people before.
And I especially like what he mentioned about Abby being the sort of a bridge between June and Caroline and the group itself. Since initially, especially when she just joined, she's not, nowhere near a close buddy or more than that with Caroline. So she's really there, like being that, I guess at first a ladder into getting to Caroline, and then like you mentioned, I guess what would be just a mental check about, hey, like look outside the this revenge quest you have, and though she doesn't know there's a revenge quest, but it's still very, very good observation there and a very good reason to like Abby. I do like her as well.
Yeah, I think out of the four in the group. I wouldn't really count Claire as really part of the Hounds because she came in so late in the story. Well, I guess like the main.
No, yeah.
Yeah,
It's like a side. But I think out of those four, I think Ellen's definitely got the short end of the stick in terms of character development.
Yeah.
She definitely, both Abby and Ellen both have a lot of, I think more than not, their characters are indirect detail. But where Ellen is sort of a little more, it's what's the word? Why do I always struggle with this?
Like passive or in the background?
No, it's like the word where it's like not nebulous, but like you sort of
vague.
Not vague. It's like it starts with an A.
Ambiguous.
Yeah, kind of. It's kind of ambiguous. She's a little. It's
aloof.
Abby's sort of. Abby is like the. I think the biggest reason why she's my favorite is because she's sort of the perfect bridge between direct and indirect detail.
All right.
In my something that I've fight for continuously, and I've talked about it a lot before in previous podcasts, not just this one, but other ones as well, and in posts and comments and feedback, is the importance of indirect detail, and just sort of hinting at things or throwing, having a throwaway line that could mean so many different things and reveal so much about a character without saying much of anything at all.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, some opportunities there for us, and when we talk about maybe revisiting some of the characters, it's always something we can sort of think about going forward. There's one almost throwaway line that's gotten a lot of traction. People really liked. Shadow, I don't know if you remember who said it, but they called June out, I think, near the end. It might have even been Abby, who's like, "You're always talking about wedgies," basically.
It was Ellen.
It was Ellen, yeah. And that line got a lot of traction for people, and that was surprising. And when Shao wrote that, I was like, "Whoa, Shao, why are you like stopping her from talking about wedgies all the time? Isn't that hot?" And he's like, "Nah, it's like almost too much." And people really connected with that line. They're like, "Wow, this is like legit. Like she is talking about it a lot." So the point I'm trying to make there is really just like, yeah, you're right. There are certain lines that you maybe don't expect that maybe reveal more than you think about a character, and sometimes it's more obvious that they are developing a character, or sometimes they develop a world a bit. So I think we were able to get some of them in, even with Ellen, like we mentioned, who maybe feels less developed. Obviously, all the characters share their sort of backstories as related to the group in one nice scene, but there's other instances where they do get a chance to shine, like in Ellen's case with that awesome line, which I think is really cool when you think about it. But yeah, it's indirect detail is cool, and I feel like definitely looking back, like if there was stuff we could maybe change about it, that's maybe something we could dive into more. Or that's for the next RP, Shadow. Indirect detail, a story. That's what we'll call it.
Oh yeah, if we ever do another one of those, we have a bunch of feedback to take into account.
Yeah, I think you guys did Abby. If you did a story exploring Abby, she would not be my favorite character anymore. It's the way you wrote her, that she's not a main character. She's more of a background character, and you get glimpses of her, of who she really is, but you don't get the full picture like you do with Caroline and June.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's like the perfect. It's like in entertainment, the rule of thumb is always like you always leave them wanting more,
Sure.
and that's what you did with Abby.
Nice. I'm glad you like her. She's a cool character for sure. I
Yeah,
have a
one
thing
of the
for
more
minor
underrated
characters.
ones. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah, more underrated. So it's cool she gets some love. Yay, Abby. Now we know your
Definitely.
team, Abby. But yeah, no, it's cool to see you like her. Definitely, I have a thing for, as a reader, I love minor characters. They're often the ones I can sort of gravitate to. So I'm trying to picture, like, if I was reading it, who would I like, and maybe even the sheriff, who we don't see a ton of, might be someone I like more and things. But no, it's really cool to hear because as Shadow and I have sort of been saying, it's hard to know what's going to connect with people and what they're going to like. So to hear like Abby, who I wouldn't expect is like somebody's favorite, that is really cool.
Yeah, and it's really just shows the power of writing and how it can be interpreted in a million different ways. I guess it sort of gives credibility to all those English teachers that try to pull all these incredibly deep meanings out of nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be teaching dulling a knife in schools, though. It's a story of overcoming abuse and freeing yourself from the confines of everyday society. Basically, it gets deep for sure. That's our first class.
Just imagine if there was some kind of college class or high school class about wedgie literature
Yeah, it would be pretty awesome.
There have to be like some, I guess, community. I don't know what to call it, like bibliography. Like here's a compendium of like the greatest reads or whatever. Wow. It'd be an interesting experiment finding those. Yeah. And who would be the one to have like the hearsay? Like who would be qualified to say this is the community's greatest works? Like who would be entitled to that? Like
great question.
I think Hans is the one for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if of the three of us, I would say, yeah, 100%.
I want to be in that class, though. I want to sit next to all the hot women who are reading these books, being like, what's your favorite part? You like dulling a knife? I know the writer. I can hook you up.
I think the sad part is that it would mostly be guys, though.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
Hoping to meet all these hot women.
Yeah.
If the women of that college are smart, they wouldn't sign up because they know what will happen.
Yeah, they know.
So true, dude. Very true, Shadow.
Going back to something you guys said earlier about that throwaway line, you sure talk about wedgies a lot. I thought that I didn't really think about it before, but just reflecting on it for the past couple minutes, that really is. I'd say that honestly, just that even that tiny little moment sort of rivals the fight between Caroline and Dina in terms of quality, just because it adds so much to the story. It's sort of a very self-aware moment for the novel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's not something that I've really seen much.
Yeah, and when I was writing June, Shadow, if you don't mind me quickly jumping on that,
go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really, I was very much focused on like, I gotta make this a very wedgie-filled story. I need to have the characters thinking about them all the time and have it like such a present part of the world. And Shadow and I are sort of, in a very cool way, kind of on different ends of that spectrum when it comes to stories. In some cases, sometimes we're very much like, we don't need as many of them, but sometimes, I know when we were writing this, I was like, let's keep doing more wedgies. And Shadow would be there to temper that, be like, yeah, I don't think you need that many. I think we could scale it back a bit, and the story will probably be better for it. And he was, of course, very right. And then in that case, that there had been a lot of wedgies sort of back to back, and June had been very much in this mindset of like thinking about them a lot. And then Shadow, I think, was very apt and right to sort of call that out in the story. And it was a moment that surprised me as a writer. I was like, whoa, why are we gonna like slow our roll there? We should have more. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, that's actually a really good idea, because then it did allow for June to be like, I really am thinking about this too much. And then the implications of that, like, has the revenge become too much? Like, what is she really giving up to try to get this? and this sort of dream of revenge overtaking reality. And that can be something, if we want to examine it in like a college course, being like the fetish overtaking a lot of other things in your life and what the cost of that can do to you. And even Caroline seems less focused on them than June does, which is a great sort of parallel there. So, yeah, it's a really cool line, and I'm glad to hear that lines that you don't really think too much about are ones that can really stick with people. It sort of speaks to what you said about interpreting stories in any number of ways.
Yeah. So I'm curious, are there any sort of lost chapters of Dueling a Knife? Was there anything you scrapped? You wrote pretty much fully, and then you're like, this doesn't fit, so you sort of threw it away, but you kept it for some reason?
I don't think so. Maybe I recall. We might have scrapped like some paragraphs and lines here and there, but I don't remember like. Well, okay. So first of all, I guess it would be good to clear. We didn't write the RPS chapters. We made the chapters after the writing. So, I mean, yeah, technically we wouldn't be able to scrap a chapter, but before that, like even it's just how to say. Yeah, I guess no. What I wanted to say is just that we didn't scrap a lot of things. It's just a little bit here and there, more like trimming rather than like cutting off parts of the story. Or maybe I forgot one of them.
No, you're totally right, Shadow. Yeah, that's exactly correct. Yeah, we obviously wrote a ton, but while we were sort of breaking it up into different chapters, and even, I guess, even before that, as we were writing, there would be paragraphs or there would be lines.
Yeah.
Either like maybe it's a continuity thing, or we just were like, maybe this is too much of something that doesn't fit, or maybe this thought doesn't really work and stuff. So it'd be small edits here and there, cutting stuff. But yeah, as Shadow mentioned, it really wasn't an idea of like, this is going to be this chapter. It was mostly just a series of scenes for us that ended up working themselves nicely into a bunch of different chapters that made sense. But really, as we were going, we had a pretty clear idea, so I think that helped. As we were editing, there were very small things we did. Like, I think we removed some of the use of the term wedgie slinger, I think, if that's correct, and some smaller things there to sort of bolster it, some edits and stuff. But no, there's unfortunately no secret lost chapters we could reveal in another book. That'd be nice, though.
Lost chapters.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, I was giving you a great PR moment. You could have been, well, mate. You could have been like, well, I mean, who knows? There could be.
You could join Shadow's Patreon and get cool, not Dueling a Knife lost chapters, but other additional content, maybe.
So everybody listening, keep in mind that 10 years down the road, when Shadow and Hans are making millions off of their books, if they somehow mysteriously come up with a lost chapter for Dueling a Knife, it is fabricated. It's not real.
Yeah, that's a fake one. Yeah.
You just ruined our whole money-making plan. That was the strategy.
Yeah, what we'll say in the future is that we found the lost chapter we had forgotten.
That's right. We had forgotten all about it, but then we remembered it.
Nice. Were there any sort of plot points that you decided not to keep in, or you thought would be really good and you tried to write them, but it just didn't work?
Oh yeah, I can already think of a couple. I don't know if you want to start, Hans.
I can't remember as many very clearly. Go ahead, Shao. Start us off, and they'll come to me as you're talking, I imagine.
Well, I'll start with one that sort of made it, but it wasn't as present as we initially thought. And that was June's mother. Story. There are some very vague references here and there. And those ones were actually added on edits.
That's right.
But like it initially was gonna be like it wasn't, of course, part of the when we started the story. We didn't think from the beginning that hey, it's gonna be here. But as we wrote along, we thought it would be a good idea to have her fit in the story somehow, to reflect some of June's past and have her think about her future. But that
Nice.
just ended up being background,
Yeah.
which might have been for the best, maybe not. But that's a plot point there that could
That's a
be
great
taken in
one.
a potential sequel / prequel.
True.
And the other one is that, well, it's not necessarily a plot point, but the plot itself, it was actually several plots as we wrote them. I don't know if you recall that. We didn't know the ending of the story until we wrote it.
That is an excellent point. Yeah, and I was thinking of that as you were
We
mentioning.
had two possible and potentially other branches of how the thing was gonna go, which I
Yeah.
think are pretty self-evident if you've been following the story. That like June's debating if she's gonna do revenge or not. So I guess that's already a hint there of what kind of other ending we had.
Yeah, that's a great point, Shadow. Yeah, that was what stuck in my mind, the ending. And I know very early on when we were outlining, I think for some of the first times, it was the question of like, but wait, does she get revenge in the end? And I know we had some back and forth on that. And yeah, we really weren't sure, I guess, until we had written it, as you said, Shadow, that that was actually going to be the ending we went with. So that's a really cool point to bring up.
Well, I think I helped you guys come to your lost chapter. About that
yeah.
ending.
I thought about it, and Shadow knows I can go crazy with scope creep. I was like, what if we make it interactive and they could pick their ending and we write it or something like that? Or what if we just write it anyway for no reason? We just have an ending where she gets epic revenge on Caroline and it's like brutal. But I'm glad we didn't write that. I really like how the story turned out, to see that growth. And I
Yeah.
think people were really happy with it too, which I wasn't sure about. That was the one thing. I was like, will they feel like June's arc is earned? And I was super happy to find out they did feel that way.
I mean, from a very basic perspective of a member of the wedgie fetish community, two hot girls giving each other wedgies and just
Yeah,
being together, that's a satisfying ending to me. So I don't anybody
you're not wrong.
That was already good from the start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
you pitch that idea to a room full of us, and we're in. How do you do
Yes.
it?
Definitely. Get their hands on that, so to speak. Pun intended.
And I mean, sort of going with the having multiple ideas for things. I sort of had that thing. I had a similar thing with my story, but I had to write it out. It was stuck in the idea was like stuck in my head. It was like,
Oh, yeah.
like a really annoying song I couldn't get out. I had to put it down. I am glad I wrote it out, but yeah, just a little side thing.
It's good, yeah. And like in the case of June's mother, I feel like Shadow, I don't know, we might still be on different pages about this. I think early on, I was pretty sure in my mind June's mother had died and was dead throughout the story. And I don't know if we hint at that, like the fact she's gone, to me it meant like she was dead, and that's why the sort of criminals were able to arrive, because the defender of the farm was no longer there. This tough woman who presumably was sort of a wedgie slinger herself in her younger days. But then I know as we were sort of talking about the spin-off, the idea was like, maybe she's not dead. Maybe someone encounters her. So that's still something that's up in the air. I don't think we definitively said one way or the other what happened to her in the story itself. So, yeah, when Shao mentions plot points or just things that could be different depending how you look at it, that's a really cool one as well.
That made me think of one of the things I regret of the story, but I think I'll save that if there's a question that's like, what's the thing you regret of the story?
Well, I was gonna save those for the ending because that's
Okay, I'll keep it in mind, just to keep the audience there like, what was he thinking about?
I mean, that could be interesting though, as like maybe like a prequel, sharpening a knife.
Great title. We'll take it. We struggle. I struggle with titles. Shao's better at them, but
it could like having, because you wrote her as like it. From my perspective, it sort of seemed like June's mom was sort of she either had plenty of experience in those wild lands where people gave each other wedgies all the time, or
Mm-hmm.
she was sort of into them herself. I'm wondering if she had. I guess like maybe a little bit of headcanon for me
Yeah.
was she might have been a wedgie slinger before, and it inspired Caroline.
That's interesting. That's an interesting idea, not one we thought of. We did have an idea she would encounter someone else from the Dulling a Knife world in the spin-off, if she was still alive, that is, in the continuity, and because this would be like a sequel that we had in mind, and she would be there, and she would sort of be a kind of helpful force there. But yeah, what I really had thought out in my mind was she definitely was a sort of wedgie slinger, sort of known around and pretty notorious. But the idea that she inspired Caroline, maybe that'd be a cool full circle thing. You know, the one who wedgies her daughter and gets her to meet Caroline is also one her mother inspired. You know, this weird circular, just karma almost is interesting.
Yeah, but she never actually meets her. She's such a legendary wedgie slinger. She just sort of she knows the legend, like the hangwoman.
Yeah, she's got posters of June's mom all over her room. June's like, why do you have these posters of my mom, freak?
Well, so talking about the parents, the dad was featured pretty heavily in the beginning. I'm curious to know if you guys know what happened with him, because from my understanding, it seemed like June's plan was just to go give Caroline a wedgie and come back to the farm.
Yeah.
Right.
That didn't happen.
It did not. I don't know, Shadow. What do you think? What happened to the dad?
Well, we had not a lot, I guess several ideas on how to connect June back to her father. Like, for example, initially when we were writing the RP, we didn't specify even that, when June sets off to meet Gina, and then the whole thing happens and she decides I have to do this on my own. She would have, she was expecting to just head in and return. So then she had to, she had taken one of her father's horses, or I guess her horse, and she had to bring it back, and that would have been like a thing, like, where are you going now, like, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then at the end, I think we left that kind of vague. I don't know if on purpose or we were just didn't have enough. We didn't do enough work at the ending to close everything. But yeah, I'd say maybe she left him. Maybe she didn't return with him, or maybe she did. But I guess we don't know. I guess we'll have to wait for that sequel.
Yeah, I guess we don't know for sure. We'll have to write the sequel of her dad's story. What was he doing while June was gone? And he's just bored. He's sitting around the house doing nothing. Yeah, I know, Shadow, you reminded me that we had some ideas for the ending in terms of stuff we didn't do in plot points. We thought about June returning home to her dad. Even prior to the Caroline confrontation, I just remembered. We said, have June return home. She would talk to her dad, and her dad would be like, what are you doing? You can't do this crazy stuff that you've been doing. You're getting in all this trouble, hanging out with the hounds. Like, you gotta stay home. And June would, through that conversation, maybe he would reference her mother or something. There'd be an emotional moment. She'd be like, okay, I'm not going to get revenge. And then head back to Caroline and sort of not wedgie her. But we decided to cut him out. I think we just mostly felt like it wouldn't work in terms of the climax. Like, she's running away from the criminals, like from the bank heist that goes bad. It's like, how would that logistically work that she's able to, like, go back to her house and then return and again? Yeah. It didn't feel organic and natural to us. But yeah, for my headcanon for the dad, I because I'm a bit of like a sap and like romantic, I like to think she went back there probably prior to making a house and home with Caroline. She probably went and visited him and talked and sort of squared things away, did his laundry for a week or whatever to make up for ditching him. like that, leaving him to tend the farm by himself. And then I assume they go and visit on holidays, Caroline and June. He probably gives Caroline like a dirty look every once in a while when June's not looking.
Yeah, that would be Hans has always a more optimistic look on that. So I guess that would be a good fitting for the ending we decided to go for. That would be more fitting.
I could see it, maybe. Who knows? Maybe he's like plotting his own revenge to split up their marriage or something, and it becomes one of those like rom-coms, and he's like trying to wreck their relationship until they all come to terms. That's still super optimistic.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
Can't stop myself.
I wouldn't blame him. Like, not only did she ditch him when he needed her the most, she ended up, basically, quote unquote, marrying some stranger who went and was basically extorting them.
Yeah, probably does not sit well with him. That's a really good point, Shadow. Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting that that June was so focused on her revenge, and then it sort of morphed into her being so focused on getting inside Caroline's mind that she never really had the mind space to even think about her dad.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of all she knew for her entire life up until that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea that it really does change her. And I know from reading 11/22/63 by Stephen King, very briefly, it's this time travel story. And throughout this guy's sort of adventure, he's laser focused on his goal, and to the point where he can't enjoy a lot of other moments as they happen because he's so focused on looking to this thing he has to do. And that's something I think subconsciously I channeled into June a bit, where she really does sort of ignore everything else in her goal to get her revenge, and she really can't enjoy moments without it coming out, without her having to mention them, without her having to try to force it in some way until she gets called out and she becomes a bit more self-aware, and until the end when she realizes like there's got to be more than this revenge, and where does it end if I just keep sort of trying to get that revenge and stuff.
Yeah, it's I think it sort of hits that leave them wanting more. It's one of those things that people just sort of, rather than everything being wrapped up all happily, like the finale of The Office, everything is just wrapped up perfectly and everybody's happy and everything is right in the world. It sort of leaves you with these questions, and it kind of makes you want to go back and see, maybe I can find something else out from reading this a second or third time or 10th time around. Maybe I'll glean some other bit of info from it that I hadn't seen before that could lead me down the right path.
Yeah, I like that idea of readability and that you're able to reread the story. And yeah, in the case of Dulling a Knife, maybe you want to see her arc again, or maybe you want to see, like, are there some hints early on she might not go for the revenge, and things like that? Or does the ending feel like we lead up to it well? Like, are there enough hints that, like, it makes sense that she's going to go the way she does and stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, going back to something referenced briefly, was there anything that you wanted to put in but you couldn't, that just didn't make sense?
I see.
More wedgies. Way more.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding, Shell. You know.
I know.
No, but please, go ahead, Shell. What do you think?
Well, how to put it? Well, one of the things, I guess it's the regret I was mentioning earlier. It's when you call, or when you, I mean plural, call the story a Western. I know that's the description that fits the most with the story, but if I were to change thing, I mean, if hindsight 2020 and all that, I would have spent more time developing the setting Because we had some ideas at the beginning, but we never we didn't really focus too much on them. We went straight for the characters and the dialogue, and probably for the best. But even then, it's like we didn't do enough. I think, well, at least on my end, didn't do enough to pay the setting some respect. We were drawing from Western, and I even threw like we did some of the more, I guess, stereotypical, more of the famous scenes, moments. I mean, we did a couple of them from Westerns, but it wasn't really fully fleshed out. It was more nods, or like, hey, remember this, rather than making it a proper thing that fits there. Like there was even some throwaway line that I think I mean, I didn't see any comment mentioning it, so I'm gonna guess no one got it, or if someone got it, they didn't mention it, so I'll assume you don't exist. That there's a quote from one of Clint Eastwood's movies in one of the later chapters that I thought it was like, this is so clever because I don't even need to alter it that much, and it still makes sense with the context. So I left it there, and I think.
Wow. I didn't even catch that. My dad's a ginormous Clint Eastwood fan.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a hint. It's on the bank heist scene.
Ah, nice.
If you want to
That's
repeat
cool.
that.
I'm gonna reread it now. That's awesome. Wow, that snuck by me. That's awesome. Yeah, is that for you, Shao? Were there other things before?
Yeah,
Okay.
just so not so I don't ramble too much.
No, it's all good.
We tried
Please.
some ideas like the wedges linger. We were trying this concept for. Initially, it started like we're doing a western with wedges. How are we gonna do that? Like, why don't they have, if there's our bandits, why don't they have guns? Why don't they just, shoot each other or whatever?
Yeah.
And we were trying to do this concept of the figure of the wedges linger, where, these are the law in the West. They are the ones who, are way above everyone. So that's why they just do whatever they want with wedgies, and that's their gun. And that's why, there are no guns. And that's also why in this structure, we have things like, for example, well, not only almost everyone is a woman in this setting, not only because, that's what we want to read, but because it was supposed to be part of this, structure, this hierarchy, I guess, matriarchal, if you want to call it. But mostly where it's the women who are doing the outlaw, the role of the cowboy, I guess, or the the vigilante, I guess, in the Western. And we didn't flesh most of it. I mean, I guess we just assume people are just gonna like it and on. But I guess we did get some feedback from one very talented writer.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that. And that's why I regret it, because we could have done more with that. We could have done more with that.
That's true.
Yeah, it was a little confusing. See, having this the gang be called hounds and wedgie slingers. I didn't see anybody else being called wedgie slinger, so I didn't even know that was sort of the term of a cowboy in that world.
If we kept it, we might have cut it. There was a reference that might still be in there of Dina calling herself one, but we might have cut it.
It was supposed to be like a play on words on like gunslinger.
Yeah,
but I guess it's like wedges.
But
it doesn't make sense too much.
Yeah, it didn't. Yeah, I liked it because I was like, this is how we sort of make it such a big thing in the world. It's like just wedgies everywhere, and that's cool. But yeah, when you do that, you can sort of hurt realism, and we also see that play out with the lack of dudes and there's only like two guys in the entire story, and they're both sort of hardworking, which is an interesting take on the gender roles too. Women are all bandits, guys are working hard. It's a bit of a difference.
Honest men.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I agree with all that, Shadow. I think partly it's my weakness with settings. It's something I never think a lot about unless I'm very conscious about it. I'm just sort of like, they're in a place, and now here's the wedgies, and I kind of glaze over that at times, and I've only become slightly more aware of that as we go. But I know there's some instances where we are kind of more clear about things, and we make it clear they're in a desert, or they're in a tavern and what the tavern generally looks like. But we definitely could have dug more into the real world of a Western and sort of dig into that flavor of it. I definitely agree with that too.
We could have done more research, especially since none of us are Americans writing a Western.
Yeah, and we could have went for more of that realism. Maybe we had them have guns. Maybe we have them use the guns, even if they're just shooting at each other, like during the escape. In the bank heist, maybe they have guns and they're being shot at. No one gets shot, presumably, but maybe it's just there to add a layer of realism, stuff like that. Maybe in just throwing ideas out there, like in the case of the fight with Dina and Caroline, maybe they both have guns, but they decide to toss them down because it's like more noble to fight with wedgies or something. So there's ways we could have maybe done it to build in that realism, and I think, definitely, as Shadow mentioned, we had a writer offer some very good critiques, and those were definitely the ones that came up. From my perspective, the only thing I'd maybe add is potentially a bit more psychological realism, a bit more depth into what people are thinking and feeling beyond June, who's really the core focus of that, who gets most of that in terms of what she's thinking and how the world around her is sort of affecting her thoughts and stuff. So I mentioned to Shadow, like, if we do the spin-off, I'd want to dive into some of our more minor characters and get a bit more of that and their own internal struggles and changes and things like that as a potential.
I think if I ever decide to improve the production quality on this, I'll get a soundboard and have sound bites. And I think the first one I want is, here's a place and here's a bunch of wedgies.
That's me though. I'm settings are a weakness of mine, a serious weakness. I think
that's what you're writing in a nutshell.
It's my writing in a nutshell. Some people are much better at describing a place. Me, I'm like, they're in the Wild West, and now onto the wedgies, and that's was basically it. And thankfully, Shao was able to make sure we have a more clear idea of where we were and things at times. But definitely something we could flesh out in terms of physical, actual descriptions of places to like I said, trying to capture the spirit of the Wild West and that sort of story in time without falling back on some of the more familiar scenes, like the showdown, like the High Noon showdown with Caroline and Dina, or the bank heist of like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, for example, to name some of those, or even like the revenge quest of the Western, which is a very sort of familiar take in that genre, getting revenge and stuff after the loss or the being hurt, stuff like that.
Hans, you talked a lot about realism, and that sort of brings me to something I like to call the Which Earth segment. And I'm curious to see which Earth you guys think this story set in. So we got alternate Earth, where Earth is changed to some degree, with wedgies being a center focus. Idealistic Earth, where Earth is changed to fit the desires of the wedgie community, or some aspect of it, depending on the writer. Fantastical Earth, where Earth is changed to be unrecognizable. Or realistic Earth, where Earth is normal.
I would say, but from my point of view, and Hans might disagree, I think it'll be the second one, the ideal.
I agree.
Where the world was changed to fit the theme of the story here.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, that's sort of what I got. And I think you guys did I've talked about this before, sort of creating the rules of the universe that the story's set in. Realism is one of the most important things in a story, but from my perspective, it doesn't have to be realism to Earth as we know it, as we live it. It just has to be realistic to the universe that it's set in. And so the first little bit of the story or novel or piece or whatever you call it should set the ground rules of how that universe works. And I think you guys did that extremely well.
Thank you.
You didn't overdo it with just blatantly saying, this is a universe where wedgies are the common thing. This is wedgies. this is what it is. You laid the seeds for wedgies being common, especially with having June's mother, when she's drunk, describing stories of the world outside the farm and how these wild people gave each other wedgies for fun and all that. I think that was one of the best little droplets of information to say this is the kind of universe it's in without directly stating this is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something we did well, Shadow. I don't know if you agree, but obviously it's not a super realistic story, as we were sort of pointing out, but within the sort of universe we set up, and obviously, like, you could definitely nitpick. You could say, like, how's the underwear that stretchy? But who knows? It's the Wild West. They made it out of different materials, we'll say. They made it super stretchy, but, like, she's able to get the atomic in the first chapter and stuff, which is awesome. But, yeah, we did, I think, a good job subtly hinting, like, this is the world. You'd have to sort of look closely to realize they don't have guns, and you might not realize that right away, and things like that. Like, they do fight only with wedgies, and you sort of get that, I like to think. And I think that's partly one of the reasons the story was so popular. It's that it wasn't so unrealistic, or it just didn't sort of betray what it was. It's you're reading it and you get a clear idea, like, this is not the Wild West I expect, with guns and people dying and all this violence and blood and crazy train deaths or whatever you expect. People getting lassoed or getting tied to train tracks, all those cliches, but you're going to have some cool elements of the Western, and you're going to have a lot of wedgies mixed in, which I think a lot of people did end up liking within the realism. So that's good from that.
Yeah, I just want to add that you made a great point there with that realism is not necessarily as important as making sure the story follows the rules of the universe, which I think some people call authenticity. I don't know the specifics of the term, but yeah, I definitely agree with that. It doesn't have to be like the realistic Earth. You just need to say, here are the rules of our Earth, and we're gonna follow them, and that's what people seek as realism, even though it's a fantasy world. Here, I just want to plug in, I guess, Mistborn, because I thought it was a great element of that story. They did a great thing with magic, and they did a very specific way. But they follow those rules all the way, and it feels like, authentic. It feels not out of place, even if it's all magic. That's it. That's a plug.
That's a great plug. And the sequels too, Shadow, when you read those, are excellent. There's these tiny little details that I think really build the world. Like, there's swear words that they use. I think, is it in Mistborn too? No, it might not be, but there's swear words they use that are like, they say rust when they're swearing and stuff, because they work with metals and they have all these things. So
that makes sense.
That they would say that, and it's so cool when I read that in those books. So I think that's what I was trying to do with things like Wedgie Slinger, to be like, try to make it a part of the world, try to blend in those elements that really would feel authentic. But it's a challenge for sure, and just talking now, you can hear where we feel like we maybe could have done better, where we can try to aspire to be as good as Brandon Sanderson when it comes to building these worlds and the mechanics, and having fights be that engaging as he can, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't. Man, I lost my train of thought. I was just about to repeat myself. Yeah, I mean, you guys did a fantastic job creating that world, sticking to the rules. Yeah, I've said it before. It's in previous podcasts. You can have a world full of goblins and demons and ogres and all that, and dwarves, and you throw in a robot. It's like, okay, where did that come from? That doesn't make any sense. it's just it's all about sticking to the rules of the universe, and that I think
Magic.
it's
That's
gonna
where
be
the
something.
robot came from.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good point for sure, and I'm glad to see that a lot of people feel like we've done that, and it's definitely a fair critique to look at it and be like, there's some things that we could change, and I'm glad Shadow and I are sort of self-aware to also, I think, be on the same page about ways we could improve, and hopefully we potentially take that into the next thing we write. Because if there's anything I want to do, it's write more with Shadow, because he's amazing, and it's been so great getting to write this with him and get to post it every week. And we've been RPing a lot smaller things, though, really small one-off things just for us, and it's been incredible. So yeah, if we ever dig into like the spin-off of this, it'll be stuff for us to think about as we sort of plan it out ahead, how we want to take it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got two more things, and I'll let you guys go. What is a moment in the story or the process of writing it, just anything about the story? What's one moment that you're really proud of?
All right.
Shadow. Go ahead, Shadow, yeah.
Well, I'm still thinking about it. Sorry.
Okay, I'll hop in.
Do you have
yeah.
one?
There's a few. There's some moments I really like. I guess one that I think has to stand out has to be the ending for me when we were writing that, right? A year and 4 months into it, about 80,000 words later, after, like I said, periods of inactivity where we dropped it for a bit, we would come back to it and we'd write for hours and hours, just writing back and forth, you and I. And then to get to the end and be like, wow, the story's done. We got to this ending that we had talked about like more than a year ago, back before the world went crazy with COVID or whatever, and stuff I don't even like fully realize had been going on when I think about it. It's really incredible to think about all the nights sort of spent writing that, and just to have completed it when you think about how rare that is for a story when we weren't getting paid for it and we didn't expect to in any way, or to really think that anything would come out of it other than hopefully some people read it and like it, and we weren't even sure if that was going to happen, obviously, because you can never be sure. So yeah, definitely at the end, sort of finishing that part, reading, because Shadow wrote the sort of very last bit at the ending, reading those lines, and we sort of worked on what that would look like. It was really a very, very beautiful moment for me, one that I've not really felt before as I was sort of writing. Writing endings is always really cool, because you get to the end, it's always satisfactory, and then a cool thing with Dulling a Knife, too, I guess another thing, is the editing. I'll just quickly throw to that. Like I said, I rarely ever do it because I'm too self-conscious and insecure. And I was just like, all right, Shadow, it's done. Let's post it. And Shadow was like, no, we have to edit it first, or like it's not gonna be great. I was like, all right, fine, Shadow, you win this round. But it really did improve it a lot, going back and forth, making some changes and stuff. And it wasn't my favorite part of the process, editing, but it was still really cool to sort of get to do that with him and do it. So all that sort of ending bit really sticks on my mind as being just an awesome part of the process. And I sort of, it's easy to forget how cool that can be. But doing it with him was really amazing.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. If I had to pick a different moment, because he already took that one from me. There's several, but I think one fitting would be one that was so iconic for us that we had to commission a painting for it, which is that moment when June and Caroline are in the bonfire, well, sitting by the bonfire. Caroline giving June a wedgie, sort of sneakily in front of everyone without them noticing. They just look like they're hugging, or like just leaning on each other. Well, there's something else going on there.
Yeah,
it's not a great or significant moment in terms of plot. It doesn't like, hey, here's the big change in like the narrative or the characters. It's more of a consolidating what had happened before that, where it's like June's coming to terms with, hey, I might actually like Caroline, and start that process of questioning her revenge quest and all that.
Nice.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful moment for sure. Yeah. I don't want to say every moment, but there's some stuff I really like. That first Atomic I thought was awesome. It's one I kept coming back to like for a year, just rereading that, being like, that's really awesome. And I was really happy with how that came out because Caroline's dialogue throughout, Shaw wrote really fantastic stuff for her. But yeah, definitely that scene Shao described is one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, and that artwork is really well done too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Jahuka. Shout out to Jahuka. He's a god. He was one of the coolest people to work with on that. He sent us a ridiculous number of drafts, and we were like, wow. It was amazing.
Yeah.
If only he had space and time for the art I want to commission.
Oh yeah, go with him. But also, speaking of shadows, I want to also shout out to Just Trying, who did the first.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's the first. Well, it's also the first of the story, and also the first I have ever commissioned, and it was a joint commission. Hans handled all of the financial, and I mean, we split the payment of that, but he was the contact, and he did great, and the artist also did a great job in this sort of like cover art again.
Yeah.
Call it.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, like Shao said, it was the first time he commissioned art. It had been the first time I got art in a while, and it was first time as I mentioned, Shao, first time I was like effectively brand building. Sometimes like other stories I'd written, I would get art years later and be like, "Oh, remember this story? Here's art. I finally got it." With this one, I was very purposeful with Shadow. I was like, if you want to, I'd really like to get some art. I really want to push people to the story. And then, yeah, Just Trying was great. So thanks, Shadow, for shouting him out. And it was cool to see his interpretation of the characters for the first time, right? It's rare to sort of see your characters in art, unless you're an artist where you have a ton of money, or people are insane and they draw your characters for some crazy reason because you're like so lucky. So it was super cool to see them, and then Jahuka did an awesome job as well interpreting that scene. So yeah, it was really, really awesome to get art coming out while we were posting and get to see people's reaction to that, because they got to sort of experience these scenes with the art and experience them in new ways, which I thought was really cool too.
Well, I think also, just to add a little there, someone made a great observation there that by posting the art, we sort of spoiled a moment of the story for those who were waiting for the full release of the story to read.
Yeah, good point. For those binge readers, yeah. Sorry, guys. You should have been reading it as it came out.
I don't think that art really showed too much. I don't think it really revealed much of the story. I think it was just sort of an enticing point, like this. You should read this. Like this. I thought it was more so just more of a teaser of the story and kind of a drawing in point more than a spoiler.
Good. That's what we wanted.
Yeah. So one final thing, sort of a callback to something earlier we talked about a little bit. If you guys were teaching a class about wedgie literature, what stories would you put on the curriculum?
Damn.
Wow, what a question. 4 hours later. Okay, Shao, now you can answer the question.
Nah, you just said the thing we were saying, like, oh, no one's qualified to say this. Alright, I'm gonna ask you. Alright.
Well, we need a Shadowmelder section, of course. We'd have to have like a 4 weeks on that. And starting with a thief spirit and working backwards to the unseen universe. No, I mean that's a tough question. Shao, I'll try not to ramble too much because I've named my favorites a few times. But are there some, Shadow? Do you want to try to hop on this? And dulling a knife definitely has to be in this class. I think goes without saying.
Well,
but
I mean, not to be too humble or whatever. I don't think. I mean, it's debatable. If Dulling a Knife would be in there, but it would certainly be a candidate. I would say that.
Nice.
One that I think would be a 100% guarantee part there on the curriculum. It would be YWNR.
Wow. Wow.
I think it's one of the stories that wouldn't see any, like, very few, if any, objections to being in the curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, are you surprised, Hans? Everybody talks about
I'm
how it's
flattered. Yeah, people really like that story. I really like that
It
story.
influenced
so-
me when I was
yeah.
just a lurker, reader, whatever, on the forums. Was one of the foundational pieces where it was like, man, I want to write something. It's like,
Wow. Wow. That's beautiful.
and I can think of others, but it's kind of hard. It's like, wow, let's look back at all of the.
The whole history of the community, yeah.
I mean, I can talk about my inspirations, but that doesn't mean that something inspired me. It doesn't mean it's like a thing that would be good for everyone. It's like that's a different thing. So,
But we get YWNR. We could just do a class on that. I could teach it. Be awesome. We have to talk about me, which I love. I definitely shout out some Shadow stories though. Shadow knows I'm a huge fan of his, which is why I was so excited to get to write with him. And he has done awesome stuff. Stories like Nightfall, I think everyone should read. There's stories that Shadow's like, people love this story, like An Otherworldly Birthday, or With a Friend in the Dark, I think is one of the best stories ever. I love that story. So I'd put a lot of Shadow stuff in there, definitely, including Telling a Knife. And I just say this is all about Shadowmelder, and like just talk about how great he is for the class. But there's so many, like a lot of the classics, everything from Nicely Done, Anti-Cherry, all those names to see that I always bring up.
yeah, bring those up. Bring those up classics. That's what we're asking for. Don't praise your co-author. Praise the people who founded the community. Go for it.
Certainly, yeah, certainly. Yeah, the Blood Monies, the Luckily Unluckies, the Sore Winners that were a big influence on me, and then
Yeah,
I think would definitely be worth a class. You could do a class just on Anti-Cherry, I think, and then look at a lot of his work. But yeah, there's so many. But hopefully, for those interested, they look at some of those classics on Lucky Fish.
but that's the thing.
Forum.
We're asking for the classics, like for those who don't know them, so they can go read them. Right? I
Yeah.
think that's the idea of the question here.
One that I have never really seen discussed, but is absolutely a major influence on me, and I would absolutely include in my curriculum, is Feeling the Fire Until It Burns.
Yes, that's a nice story.
Killing the fire until it burns.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, that is absolutely a masterpiece. It's so well written. I look up to it as something like a pinnacle, something I want to achieve someday, maybe.
Yeah. Nicely done again, as I mentioned.
Mm.
Incredible writer, one of our best writers. And
Yeah.
I brought him
Really
out of
is.
retirement, right? Now he's posting art, incredible art, insanely good art on DeviantArt. And he's gotten a ton of followers there. But yeah, Feeling the Fire Until It Burns. Sadistic is another one that's even it's way better than Feeling the Fire Until It Burns, and Feeling the Fire Until It Burns is really good.
No way.
It is. You got
Way
reread
better?
Sadistic and then tell me it's not way better. It's way better.
Okay, is that just because it's longer? There's more.
Yes,
there's more
it is longer, but it's also way better. Yeah, Feeling a Fire Until It Burns is only a few parts for those who don't know, but it's like awesome story. Sadistic. It's like super deep into the mind of a character and just some awesome scenes. It's the sort of stuff that, like, if we're talking about what was foundational, it's the stuff I was reading and commenting on a lot, just being like, I really want to write like this and to be able to write witchy stories like this. So the stuff he did was great. Anti-Cherry as well. Those sort of realistic writers at the time. I was like, this is what I feel like the community can be at its best.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think I haven't read Sadistic in a fucking while, but
It's so good.
I mean, I don't think I've read Feeling the Fire Until It Burns in the same amount of time, but that story has stuck with me as, like, even now I think it would hold up and it would blow past many other people today with just the quality of the writing.
Yeah.
And how,
Yeah.
just the details and how intricate everything is, even
Yeah.
for how short it is.
Yeah, and I was wrong. Cosby Rerun wrote Sadistic, but they're sort of similar in how realistic they write and also how talented they are. They're sort of on par as being really amazing. But I highly
yeah.
recommend people check out, both those stories. Because Nicely Done, Can Do No Wrong, and Cosby Rerun has just wrote amazing stuff, including Sadistic, which everyone should read.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't read any of the stories you have mentioned, so you were like, "Oh, you should read this story by Shadowmelder called this," and then you just brush through like this, like I guess basically like machine gun fire of all of these classics that I haven't read. I couldn't even write them down, but I'll be sure to look them up.
Nice.
All I can say is you should go through, for anybody listening and for Shadow as well, you should just go through the Lucky Fetish forum, go through the fictional story board, and like read everything on it. There's going to be a lot of trash on there, a lot of unfinished stories, but there's going to be a lot of gold as well. And that's where so many of the classics came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the login still, the registering working again, or is that like...
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was open and closed for a bit. I think it's easier to get in now. I think you can get in and register.
Yeah,
but I
hopefully.
could be wrong.
I
Hopefully.
mean, I heard a couple of people who are like, "Oh, I've never seen Lucky Fish. Let me check it up," and it's like it's not working. They can't register, so they can't read it.
Yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, I can just give you my login information so you can,
We're gonna come and we're gonna finish Excommunicado is what we're gonna do. I mean, Endless Sexual Energy. We're gonna finish that.
Wow.
As I like to call it.
Every time you bring it
That's
up,
what we're gonna finish. Excommunicado is
it
not
will
the right name.
finish.
Sorry.
it will get
Yeah,
finished eventually.
But we'll finish your story for you, and we'll post a bunch of other stories. And we'll go, wow, this Nufator guy, he's so crazily productive. Fortunate events. Fortunate by Nufator. Really good story. You guys should check out too.
Yeah. Yeah, just remember it's Nufatora, not Sacellum that's on DeviantArt in case you...
Yeah. Thank you, Sean.
I would change one or the other, but you can't, so oh well.
Yeah.
On
Just throwing
TA,
it there for
you
your
can, but-
listeners to remember that two different usernames when they're looking up.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you guys have any final thoughts on Throwing a Knife?
It's amazing. Amazing writing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I meant. And a lot of things we could have done better.
I think
And
so, yeah.
it's a great experience overall. And
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I had a lot of fun with it. Definitely echo everything Shadow said. It was awesome writing it with him, and I hope I get to do more long form writing with him in the future if he'll let me. Because it was a lot of fun, and I got to learn a lot and really push myself, and that's what you need to do, I think, in this community and as a writer, and getting the opportunity to do that and to write something people really, really, really loved, which was awesome. Is just so incredible. So I'm super glad people liked it, and I want to thank everybody again for reading it and for all the nice comments and love you've shown us as we've been posting it.
Yeah, so Dulling a Knife is fully out, so you can binge read it whenever you want. Absolutely check it out. It's extremely good. It's well written. All the praise in the world for it. Check out everything that Hans Gutherson has done on DeviantArt, on Lucky Fetish's Wedgie, Shadowmelder. I'm not sure if your DeviantArt name is just Shadowmelder, if there's anything else for it.
yeah, it's the Shadowmelder without the dash that was taken in DeviantArt. That's why they're different.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Check out all the stuff. Have you posted anything on Lucky Fetish? Any stories besides Dulling a Knife?
There's no exclusive. I mean, that's where I started writing, but I migrated everything to DeviantArt. So if you've seen it on DeviantArt, it's also on Lucky. I mean, if you've seen it in Lucky Fetish, it's on DeviantArt as well.
Well, check it out on Lucky Fetish anyway. We need the traffic.
Yeah, we could use it and the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. This is Nufatora, aka Sacellum. This has been the Best Book Club. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
It's great talking
Thanks
with
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much for having us and
Thank you.
the questions. It was a great conversation. And
Amazing.
Yeah,
Great to talk about it.
I barely had to do anything. You guys were fantastic guests.
Oh, thank you. We try. It's easy for
Yeah,
us, though. We wake up like this.
Wow.
Oh. This has been another episode of the Best Book Club, and I will catch you later.